Hi, everybody. It's Tim Hagen from Progress Coaching, and I wanted to introduce you to a pretty cool concept called feedback progressions. Now, over the last couple months, I've been at a variety of about 5 or 6 client sites, and the results are always the same. So we come on site, we do this thing called the best practice session, and we role play. We pair people up and we practice the coaching conversation. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is something called a feedback progression. When we do our feedback, we structure it. We have rules of engagement. We don't leave it to chance. Let's be honest. How many people, when you ask them, are you thrilled to role play today? Not a lot of hands go up, right? So I always ask at the start of my session, how many of you are a little bit nervous or apprehensive about role playing? Most of the hands in the room go up. So what that teaches us is something very important. They do not have a positive association with role playing or practicing. Why is that? Well, the reason being is that most people will get feedback such as, well, Tim, that was pretty good, but if I were you, or the way I would handle that, and we start to self-impose our belief system. We start to self-impose the way we do things. And what happens is that creates a disdain, it creates a disconnect, it creates a lack of pleasure in actually practicing. Now, number 2, can we at least be honest about one thing? People don't arbitrarily get better, right? I mean, it's a lot like I did a keynote a couple of years ago in front of thousands of people at a corporate site. Can you imagine if somebody came up to me and said, oh, Tim, don't practice. Get up there, wing it. Yeah, you're on 2 stages. It's pretty high up. You can't see the front row. There's bright lights. Oh my gosh, don't practice. You'll nail it. And by the way, you won't be nervous at all. I hope you're laughing, right? I use a little bit of sarcasm to make my point. But here's the funny thing about practice. It is a weapon that most companies don't leverage. Salespeople hate role playing. Typically, they hate it. Why? Because they don't have a strong association with it. That's where feedback progressions come into play. So what we do with a feedback progression is we structure the feedback. So when I deliver my best practice, I always provide the following information. I'll have someone do a practice session and I'll say who is playing the role of coach. They raise their hands. I look to their partner and say, what's one thing your partner did really, really well he or she should be proud of? What does that do? The person who just practiced or role played is hearing feedback from their teammates. And then we switch roles and we provide the same structured feedback. The second round of role plays or practice sessions, I might ask the person who directly played the role, what's one thing you did that you're actually proud of? Now I've got them talking about themselves positively. And I might do that for a couple sessions. I do not provide constructive feedback until the afternoon. I will go through about 4 or 5 rounds of feedback where we use self-actualized questions. What did you with a success imperative? So Bob, what did Susie do extremely well during a practice session she should be proud of? Bob, what did you do that you're very proud of? I'll ask questions such as, Susie, stylistically, what's one thing that Bob does extremely well that he may not even be aware of? So after about 4 to 6 rounds of positive feedback, people are feeling good about getting better. Now, some of you might be saying, but wait a minute, what about constructive feedback? Here's the funny thing. When people practice, 99.9% of the time, they are not unaware of the things where they have an opportunity to improve. But what we want to do is create a cadence of momentum so they can feel good about continuing to practice. So then in the afternoon, I introduce a concept called constructive feedback, but I frame out how they provide the feedback. So Bob, where do you feel like Susie has an opportunity to improve? Notice the opportunity to improve, and that's based on a concept called WIFT, what's in it for them. So when we structure our feedback and we have a series of positive feedback sessions, we've gained momentum, which ultimately builds greater acceptance to do what? Receive constructive feedback. Then when we deliver constructive feedback and we have a rule of engagement of deliver to your teammate with the phrase, I think you have an opportunity to improve, and give them one area. I don't ask for 3 or 4 areas because it'll feel like piling on, and that can really create a disdain for the next practice session. I've had people who are VPs, directors, people in the C-level suite, literally nod their head and say, yeah, I'm kind of nervous about role playing and practicing. I'm not very good at it. The reason people aren't good at it is they don't do it a lot. So what you can do at your organization is implement practice sessions. I would even stay away from the word role playing. Then structure your feedback progressions. If you structure them and you structure the feedback at least initially for the first 4 or 5 sessions to be positive, and then you introduce constructive feedback using the words where I think you have a wonderful opportunity to improve is, and then they fill in the blank, you will be amazed because every session I've taught, I ask at the end of the day, how many of you felt more comfortable today than you thought when we started earlier this morning? Every hand in the room goes up. Not because I'm a great trainer or great coach, but it's really leveraging that feedback progression. Think about this. If our teams were not just willing, but what if our teams wanted to practice? What if our customer service teams wanted to practice? What if our sales teams wanted to practice? Wouldn't we have a competitive edge in the marketplace? I hope this has helped. Introduce feedback progressions in your next practice sessions. I promise you'll see a huge difference. Thanks for your time.